The next thing I want to go over that I know Matt really wants to talk about would be legalizing drugs. And let's start with Jerem, and then Matt can respond, and then anybody can hop in wherever they want. Jerem, how would you define maybe the difference between legalizing the selling of like meth versus pot or something like that in an ideal society for you?
How would I? Okay, it's just okay. So just like
Like, do you think there's certain drugs that shouldn't be legal? Like, if you go down to the pot store, should you be able to buy pot, cocaine, meth, all these different things, or do you think there would be different regulation? Just kind of a quick little snippet on how you think that should play out.
yeah. So my current stance is that like so drugs are bad, and if we could get rid of them, we should. But I don't know how we can do that, and it seems that uh, by trying to get rid of them, it kind of makes them worse. So my position is that all drugs should be legal, at least all drugs that are like available currently. Yeah, I don't
Okay.
think we should incentivize like creating future like um meth 2.0 or whatever, but um yeah, I think it should be legalized.
Okay. Well, okay, Matt, before you go, Phil, I think you might have a stance that I'm torn between, and I think I might like the same stance you have. Phil, you say your stance, and then Matt, you go ahead and counter Phil's.
Yeah, I remember that actually this is an issue where I'm like surprisingly, very, very authoritarian on this issue. It's like if a drug doesn't have any redeeming quality, then I feel it should be illegal. There are serious externalities to making drugs illegal, right? Um, I grew up with sort of an urban myth that I found out was wrong later, which was that like prohibition did not um, have much of an impact on alcohol consumption. It just created organized crime. But actually, prohibition solved a huge number of social ills, right? We used to drink every single day. Like the average person would just drink all the time and be like it'd be a serious problem. And after prohibition, that completely changed. Um, but it also created massive externalities in the form of other social problems. Um, so I don't think there's an easy answer. I do think that even if we don't seriously punish, um, even if we find that what we have to do is that if we prosecute drug users and drug dealers, that creates more trouble for us than it's worth, and it harms more people than it helps. Then okay, that's one argument. But we shouldn't have it on the books that like drugs that do not have redeeming qualities to them for society should be legal. I don't think there's any reason for that. I think that's also going to create more social ills that it solves.
Okay. Hello, Lewis. Hello? Hello?
Is he back?
I think he's back. Maybe not. Well, there's no echo, so that's good. Matt, do you want to respond to Phil?
Yeah, I mean, I'm against all drug laws, both from a principle point of view and from a practical point of view. I mean, Phil did allude to some of the problems, and there are many, many problems that come from the drug laws, and Jeremy mentioned it as well. And also, I think the principle is wrong. I mean, I think all laws should come from the basic concept of individual self-ownership, and drug laws are one of the most obvious violations of that concept. I have a right over myself, and I don't have a right over anybody else. I think it's a pretty simple concept, which is consistent with all other crimes that we understand, like rape, murder, theft. All violate that principle, and all free activities that we enjoy that aren't crimes don't violate that principle, and the reason is because of that. So from a principle point of view, I think that we commit crimes when we violate people's individual self-ownership by criminalizing their drug use, no matter how bad it is for them. And the other problem is there's a subjective standard with regards to, well, what's serving you and all the rest of it. I mean, there's a very good argument for the fact that alcohol should be illegal before most of the currently illegal drugs would be, if you were going to do it based on societal harms, individual harms, etc. Um, but then there's also our ignorance towards drugs and stuff like that. But then there's also the counterproductive aspect of it. There is the, I mean, I don't want to get into the whole debate about prohibition and alcohol and sidestep the conversation too much, but prohibition, whether it created the Al Capones of the world, it certainly did enrich them, and drug laws certainly do enrich drug traffickers, drug gangs, and and does encourage all the violence. I mean, like the Mexican cartel is more powerful than the Mexican government, pretty much thanks to drug laws, because they were able to basically exploit a market. So as bad as the drugs can be, like people have even given me hypothetical drugs that don't exist. Like, oh, what if this drug just done this? And it's like, well, still the drug's not illegal. Now, the circumstances in which someone take it, and might be reckless and criminal, and if it causes them to do something, just like drinking alcohol and then driving a car and killing somebody is reckless, but drinking alcohol in the safety of your own home is not. I just can't abide a law that would criminalize people for what they're doing to their own body, no matter how detrimental it is. Otherwise, we should start arresting people when they go into McDonald's.
Yeah, I want to share my thoughts here. I mostly been staying out and having each other talk, but I have some thoughts that I think are somewhat interesting on this topic. And then after that, I'll get to Lewis and Travis on the topic. So I got two ways of looking at it. One is I pretty much feel exactly what Matt just said, but when it comes to something more devastating to the human, like say meth or heroin, I don't like the idea of easy access for kids. So I want any adult to be able to make whatever choice they want. They can destroy their own bodies if they want, but kids are very impressionable. And so if somebody could just go to the pot store and buy some meth and then get their 13-year-old friend to do it so he can feel cool, then I feel like like stats aside, just like the possibility of something affecting somebody's life so drastically, I think my main thought is that everything should be legal, but the more detrimental it is to, say, a child or just a human, it should be in a facility where somebody can go and say, I want some heroin, and a professional can shoot them up with heroin. They can even go in with their friends and they get their high. And as soon as they're done, they go home. But they can never take it home. Nobody can buy it for a minor the way you can buy them cigarettes. And also you're not going to have junkies doing drugs while they have a baby in the next room. So that's one angle I take in the angle that I want to legalize it. In the angle that I lean more towards Phil would be that I don't think it should be illegal for anybody to do something, but maybe it should be illegal to sell certain things. Like nobody's owed a store existing with drugs in them, or with anything, even with processed sugar or whatever. So if we deem something unhealthy and detrimental to our society, we could say, okay, so there's a law saying you can't have this in a store and sell it, but if you make it in your own backyard and use it and you're found with it, it's not illegal to have it. So I would be in favor of either of those two routes. But yeah, let's hop over to Lewis and see what Lewis's thoughts are on all that. If Lewis is still there. Lewis, you there?
Test. Can you hear me? Test.
I can hear you. You're there.
Oh, finally. Wow. Because I'm on my desktop, and it's been a very, very long time since I've used the mic here. And I had things disconnected. Anyway, am I clear? Is there crackling? Is the issue resolved from last time?
Yeah, I think it's resolved.
Okay. So because I was doing a whole bunch of testing here, I did not actually follow what your last question was. So if you could just repeat it, and I'll give my opinion.
Yeah, just your stance on legalizing drugs, like whether maybe if you see a difference between legalizing marijuana versus something harder like meth. In an ideal society where you were making the law completely, what would your stance be on legalizing drugs?
I do see a difference. I'm not entirely sure where to draw the line. I would legalize marijuana use. I guess I would need more information on legalizing meth. I think that I'm currently leaning towards not legalizing it, but I'm not entirely opposed to the I'm not entirely opposed to it if sufficient evidence can be brought forward that legalizing meth would not. And I guess there would also be. Let me think about this for a moment. Yeah, I don't know enough about meth and meth use. Like, is there a certain amount that can be used that, uh, maybe not a complete ban of using meth, but maybe up to a certain dosage may be legalized? I'm not
Hmm.
well informed enough to know where I would draw that line.
Gotcha. Okay, well, let's hop over to Travis. Travis, what are your thoughts, having heard everybody else?
So I would favor legalizing marijuana. Um, I wouldn't be, I wouldn't support legalizing other drugs in the same way, but I think I would be in favor of like allowing safe injection sites.
Okay. Well, okay, let's go back to Matt then real quick. Matt, would you be against do you have a strong stance that would okay, let's say people were talking in a society about some people wanted to have it completely legal to be sold at any stores, and then other people are saying they want it to be legal, but a few of the harder ones they want it to be at a safe injection site. Do you have a strong stance that you would need it to be just completely legal, or are you kind of liking both of those close to equally?
Um, I've got a strong stance with regards to law. Now, a lot of what you're talking about with, like, the facilities and stuff sounds great, and I don't object to that, and I don't even object to having like a regulated market, for example, where businesses within that regulated market are not allowed to sell certain drugs or things or do certain things, because that's a different thing, because that's a rule within a regulated market for participating businesses. But what I'm saying is that the simple act of selling to another person's, like, unregulated trade off what we currently call the black market, should be not a criminal thing in my view, if the act itself is not criminal. And from my point of view, from a principle, although I do think there's practical problems with drug laws as well, but from a basic principle point of view, I think when we criminalize somebody for using or even trading a drug with another consenting adult, and I am talking only consenting adults here, not children, then criminalizing them, when we do that, we are then committing a crime, because we are initiating force against somebody who is themselves not actually violating anyone's rights.
Gotcha. All right. Lewis, just so you know, I don't think I'm too worried about it, but there was some strange noises that I muted your mic during Matt talking for a sec. It was like a weird,
Oh,
it sounded like
man.
a whale sound. But
I've got my pet whale here, so don't just
Right.
ignore that.
but yeah, Phil or Jerem, did either of you guys hear anything throughout all that, or the last thing Matt said that you wanted to respond to with this topic?
Yeah. So a couple things. So yeah, I was also under the, as far as like prohibition goes, I was also under the impression that it like sort of made things worse. But if I could be convinced that it like made things better, I would actually completely 180 and be pretty authoritarian on the issue. And then also upon reflection, I actually might want to lean more towards having uh rather than legalization, more of just a like a decriminalization, or like just having safe injection sites. I do like that idea. So yeah, just things I'm thinking about.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with Jerome there in terms of like prohibition. Like, um, if it were the case that prohibition was actually a successful in achieving its goals and resulted in like better outcomes for society, or better outcomes in general, then yeah, I would be in favor of placing outlawing like alcohol and cigarettes as well, if it were the case that um, that led to better outcomes.
Outlawing but decriminalizing. So if somebody grows their own tobacco and dries it out and makes a cigarette, they're fine, but it's just not allowed in stores if it leads to a better outcome for like the masses.
Well, I
I
mean,
can't. Oh, sorry.
yeah, I mean, for me, it would just be if it leads to better outcomes, it leads to better outcomes, right? So even if uh, I might even go far enough where it's not even like decriminalized; it's just fully outlawed.
Oh, and wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Phil, what's up?
I can't speak to whether or not in totality that there was a good outcome. I just mean it had a major impact in terms of alcoholism, right? Reducing alcoholism. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it was a good outcome for society when you take into account the growth of organized crime. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that answer for sure.
Yeah.
I will say that, like, the way I see it, I think one thing that comes up a lot more and more is, for me, the distinction between different laws we have for children versus for adults is just a matter of how confident does our threshold have to be, or at what threshold does our confidence have to be in terms of our willingness to, violate what someone else wants to do with their life. That threshold is a lot lower for a child than it is for an adult, right? But if we as a society decide there's going to be much better outcomes if we're very controlling of people in a certain way, then I'm okay with controlling adults too. So I don't have like a deontological insistence that no, people have the right to do X, Y, or Z, even if it harms themselves and others.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
don't I don't have that deontic view either.
Gotcha. Um, and I'm torn. I think I mostly actually lean towards Matt's stance on this. I just like any topic. I have concerns about children. I don't have any concerns about adults. I would love to help adults. I would want a government that's capable to share all the information, to have Surgeon General warnings. But once you hit adulthood, I hope and wish the best. But as far as what I'd outlaw in almost all cases, it would just be in defense of children.